If you're a dad, you're not afraid to work hard.
Never give up.
Never compromise.
And the best dads always look for ways to get better.
I'm looking for something to energize me.
I'm looking for something to push me further.
And I'm looking for something to go with these nachos.
Dad Fuel, the energy drink designed just for dads.
So I can finish the fight.
So I can finish the race.
So I can finish mowing the lawn. And later on, I might watch some golf.
The fuel dads need to do the things dads do.
Climb the highest peak.
Go the furthest distance.
Check the scores. Read the newspaper. Give amazing relationship advice. Why are you crying? You should really talk to your mother about that.
Dad Fuel comes loaded with taurine, ginseng, and 100% of your daily recommended value of Hi Hungry, I'm Dad.
I start every morning with the 4 Ds. Devo's, donuts, Dad Fuel, down blanket. Breakfast of champions, baby.
Now available in 4 bold flavors: Original Orange, Grow Model Raspberry, Grill Master Mango, and I thought I told you to take out the garbage grape.
You can't touch my passion.
You can't touch my drive.
And you definitely can't touch my thermostat. No way.
So whether you're thirsty for victory
Or just plain thirsty. No, seriously, it's empty. Can I get another one?
Dad Fuel.
Because I am fearless.
Because I am unstoppable.
Because the players on TV aren't gonna yell at themselves. Come on! Throw the ball!
Well, hello, my friends, and happy Father's Day wherever you are joining us today. We are so glad that you are with us. And as you can see, I have some incredible men with me today, a panel. I'm going to introduce them shortly, but we want to wish every dad a happy Father's Day. And gentlemen, you know what's interesting? When it's Mother's Day, we talk about how great moms are. And when it's Father's Day, we talk about how bad dads are. So we're not going to do that today. We're actually here to encourage people, and we're here to talk about the wisdom of God, because these are some very interesting days that we are living in. And so, my friends, I want to introduce the panel to you. Starting at my left here, we have Blair McDonald. Blair is software sales, has a son and a daughter, fairly new to our congregation. And welcome, Blair. So glad to have you. And you were born in Nova Scotia.
That's right.
All right.
Born and raised.
Sean James from Zimbabwe, all the way from Zimbabwe. He's been in our church a long time. He's one of our elders. And really, you've been in the whole automotive world. You're working for Auto Trader right now. And you have a son. I didn't ask you, Blair. I'm sorry. How old are you children?
My daughter just turned 12 and my son just turned 10.
All right. And your wife is from Trinidad?
Born here, but
Right.
that's the pedigree, yes.
Okay, so we have a mixed marriage there as well.
Yeah.
And Sean, your son?
Ricky is 25 now.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Engaged?
Engaged to be married in a year. So, life is moving on. The age is telling, as you can see.
I can see.
Yeah.
Then here we have Zabdil McNugent, who was originally born in Pakistan.
That's
Also
right.
a son and a daughter. And how old are they?
Azan is 17 and Yerusha is 12.
Right. And Zabdil, you come from the whole finance background, real estate.
Yes.
And you have your hand in everything, insurance and...
Amen, thank God.
And David Wilson is the only non-father. And every year I like to invite a non-father, David, newly married. How's that going?
It's going very well.
Yeah, good answer. Good answer.
Very, very well.
All right. And so really, David is an aspiring actor. And so we've seen him in some things, and we're looking forward, once the world opens up, in seeing him in some other things coming up. And
That's right.
and so David, and a personal trainer.
Yes, sir. Yes.
So I've invited David because really we want to hear from your back. You grew up in an excellent Christian home, and so we want to hear about your background, your experience, and where you believe fathers can be effective moving forward. So, gentlemen, and for those of you watching, I want to give some statistics so we understand why are we doing this program and how important are fathers really, because we're living in a world where men, fathers, we're ridiculed. I mean, we're not even, in certain circles, they don't even want you to use the term father anymore, and that's not going to happen here, but just so you know. But let me give you some statistics here. 63% of youth suicides are from fatherless homes. That's 5 times the average rate. 70% of youth in state-operated institutions come from fatherless homes. That's 6 times the average. 71% of all high school dropouts come from fatherless homes, which is 7 times the average. 75% of all adolescent patients in substance abuse rehab come from fatherless homes, 10 times the average. 80% of rapists were motivated by displaced anger that came from fatherless homes, 11 times the average. 85% of children who show behavior disorders come from fatherless homes, 15 times above the average. 85% of youth in prison come from fatherless homes, 15 times the average. And then 90% of all homes, homeless and runaway children are from fatherless homes, 24 times the average. My friends, the numbers don't lie. So here's my very first question. And David, I'm actually going to start with you on this question, but tell us, how was your dad present? And I want to ask all of you this question. And because, you know, when we're talking about a fatherless home, it means the father's not there at all. But, you know, sometimes we can be home but not home. So how are you actually present? David, how was your dad present? What did it mean to you that your dad was home?
Well, thank you, Pastor. First and foremost, I'm the oldest boy. So I have 2 older sisters and a younger brother. And so for me, it was very important to my dad that he spent time with me. He was very intentional about it. I played tackle football. I started when I was 8 years old. And so, for example, every Sunday was game day. And so that was something that was specifically special between me and my dad. Anytime I scored a touchdown, I was given the reward of driving home. So like, I was behind the wheel at 12 years old with, you know, my dad right beside me. We would be taking the back rows. This isn't Pickering. So, but it was he was very, very intentional about instilling principles as the oldest son, as a young black man. It was very important for my dad to make sure that he was raising somebody that was not going to be a part of another statistic. So
awesome. Yeah. So Abdil, how are you present?
Well, myself or my dad?
You, how are you?
Okay, how I'm at present is I'm involved in everything that my kids do. Their social life, their internet life, their social media, their education, their family life, their interpersonal relationship as brother and sister. Sometimes I feel that I'm perhaps interfering, and they tell me I am. But I believe children nowadays need a lot of direction. And unless I give it to them, they're not going to receive.
Wow.
There's a ton of people out there who are ready and willing to give unnecessary details to the kids. So I need to be present in everything in their life.
Wow.
So I make sure that I'm present. I get involved. My son is 17. Hopefully, God willing, next year he's going to start planning for his university. We've already started discussing. 2 years from now, this is what's going to happen.
Wow.
This is what you need to do. So I believe, as a father, I need to be there for everything. I'll give you an example. My own uncle, my dad's elder brother, had photographic memory. And all his life, first-class position. But what did he become? A professor of Arabic, English, and 2 other languages. Why didn't he become a NASA scientist? He didn't have the right direction. My grandparents were farmers, so they couldn't give him the right direction, which side to go, where to go. I believe all children have a great destiny in our great nation here, and we need to show it to them.
Excellent.
They need to be able to discern for them with the direction we give them.
Wow. So I'm hearing direction, I'm hearing affirmation and rewards. Sean, how are you present?
Yeah, so for me it's a little different. I mean, I have an adult child now.
Right.
So I can speak to, his early years. one thing I made sure about was being interactive with him. See, growing up for me was different because my dad wasn't home much. He worked a lot. And being in boarding school as well, I wasn't in the home as much. But even when I did come home and spend time at home, my dad was always working. I never really knew my father till I was 18. When I say knew my father, like, I knew that was dad.
Right.
But I never really had a relationship with him until pretty much when we moved to Canada. And at that time, I was 16. And I really only started to forge relationship with my father around about 18. So having that sort of experience, I understood that it was important for me to be interactive in my son's life.
Yeah.
And so what I ended up doing was, spending time with him. And, and I appreciate, Zab and David in what they shared. And something I found was, finding out what was his passions, understand what drove him, and fuel that,
right.
But like Zab
he's quite
said,
the baseball player.
Right, and he went on a scholarship and all the rest of it. And, but even before he was a baseball player, with karate, because I was heavily involved in martial arts, he started coming along with me and, he started training. And, you fuel that and just be present with them in his school life, I was an athlete in high school. My dad was never there to see me win accolades and awards and all the rest of it. And so I made sure that I was there for those, monumental times where kids remember things, know. And asking him, what do you need from me as your dad? What do you need more from me? And being that interactive parent where it's just not, sit down, do your homework, go sleep, whatever it is. It's more so, how can I be part of what you do rather than just, right, I'm your dad.
So not just be part of what I'm doing, I want to be part of your world.
Correct.
That's what you're saying, Sean.
Exactly.
That's excellent.
Yeah.
Blair?
Part of it is habits, habitual, and part of it is ad hoc. My father was very busy. I'm very busy, and I look at what he did. He would be very intentional in terms of, he would try and include me in chores, or that we were chopping firewood, or we were pulling firewood from the shed into the house, or we needed to go buy groceries, you need to run an errand. So he would deliberately, intentionally take me along so that we could spend time together and talk, and just sometimes didn't have to talk. There'd just be silence, but we would be there enjoying one another's company. And I try and do the same thing. Part of it is habitual. Like my father always taught me, the family that prays together stays together. So we're always morning and at night, devotional prayers, and I give my children an opportunity to say, hey, is there anything that you want to praise God for, give thanks for, or ask him for? And sometimes it's a very short prayer, and sometimes it's a very, it's a long, drawn-out, heartfelt prayer. But prayer is at the core. That's the habitual. That is the routine that kind of keeps that familiarity. But the ad hoc comes when one of the kids come in the room and I'm busy, I'm heads down, drafting something, and they'll come in and say, hey, Dad, come look at this. And I will, on purpose, stop what I'm doing and turn and look them in the eye and say, what is it? And engage them. Just be there, be present with them. Sometimes it's hard because there's so much going on. There's so many, devices in the house. There's so much technology, put it down, set the example, which is, it's hard sometimes because everybody's trying to get a hold of you and you have to just shut it off.
That's, I want to come back to that whole area of communication and technology because, previous generations really didn't have to face this particular challenge other than maybe, the TV when the TV came out. But now the TV is just one of many, right? So let's get to that in a moment. But so guys, I want to talk about, because I want to make sure that we're dealing with hot topics here, that we're not just fluffing this program. I want to give people something that they can sink their teeth into. And I want to talk about mental health, but even before I go there, I want you to address this idea of really fatherhood and parenting that's happening in our society. Because I think a lot of dads feel paralyzed. I think people are frightened. They're watching what's happening with all this gender confusion, and dads are like, can I be a dad? Am I allowed to discipline? What can I say? What can I do? Are my kids going to be taken away from me? What would you say? You come from various generations. This is why you're actually here on the panel. What would you say to dads today? And how would you encourage them that, listen, you still need to be father, you still need to be, biblically the head of the home? What encouragement would you give, a father that's got a younger family? But what would you say, Sean, to that?
Yeah, and we're already having the discussion. Obviously, my son's probably at one point in time in the next few years is going to be a father. And something, we've instilled from, day one is, modeling the true father. First, it's God. It's right. Jesus, right? And with that, it flows down. And, we've made it very clear. And Ricky's very traditional. He's very, I would say, he's not really your typical 25-year-old. I guess, what are those, millennials now, I suppose? Yeah. He's an old soul. So he's still very traditional. And in his mind, there's dad, who is the head, the priest of the home. There's mom, who is his partner, and then everything else. And God obviously comes first. And so, we've had that conversation. I'll say to young fathers out there, you need to emulate fatherhood first. You need to be the example to your son. Because without that example, and we've heard the statistics, without that example, and Zab alluded to, there's no direction, there's nothing for them to follow. Christ modeled fatherhood for us. Right? And so we take from that and we apply it in our home, and from that, hopefully, we instill it in our children. And I can say, I watch Ricky in certain things, and it's almost eerie because you sit back and it's like you're watching yourself. Right. And it's like, this is not good. But it's good in the sense that you understand that, the emulation took. And so that now you can see the fruit of the work that you've put in. Right. So fathers, I'll say this. Don't think they're not watching. Even when they're older, they still watch.
Great point.
Right?
Great point.
They still watch.
Zabdiel, you have 2 teenagers. And I know
Yes.
your children personally. They're great kids, and I'm not just saying that. But, in this generation, they can be very rebellious. They can be very lippy. What would you say to fathers that have teenagers?
It's not easy, and it's okay, because we've been there too. We were teenagers at one point, and I'm sure I gave a lot of difficult time to my dad and mom as well. And the exposure that the teenagers have nowadays, you were right, we didn't have that kind of exposure. We didn't have that kind of a society that they live in. Right. We didn't have the privileges that the generation now has. So it's entirely a different ball game. It's a different set. It's a different time. So I believe as a father, I needed to grow up with my children. I needed to understand where are they coming from. Right. And I'll give you a little example here. My daughter said once, "Hey Dad, what do you know about this? My teacher said so." So the teacher had taken that position of being the teacher,
the authority,
and Dad cannot teach, right? I'm the father, but I can't teach. So I had to step in and tell her, "Hey, I know this subject. I have a degree in this. Let's discuss this." I had to prove to her that I'm capable of discussing that with her rather than just pushing down on her. Well, this is what Dad said. You got to believe it. You got to go by it. I had to grow up with her and explain why is what I am saying. Same thing with my son. I have to sit down and I have a one-on-one conversation with my kids all the time. I want my children, especially teenagers, to be able to come and discuss each and every subject with me. I don't want them to have that feeling, Dad is going to get upset, Dad is not going to talk about it with me. I want to be open with them on every subject. And I'll give you another example here. When the government came out with the sex program, the sex education program, yes, that was the hardest conversation I never had that with my dad. Right. I didn't know what to do. Right. But I had to grow up, grasp that, and be able to have that conversation with my son. Actually, that broke a lot of barriers. Now my son is able to speak to me how he feels. And I can tell him what is the right thinking and what is the wrong thinking. So I need to be involved with my children for every stage of their life.
Right.
Yeah.
That's great. David, are you, you're newly married. You haven't even been married a year.
It is a year.
It is a year now?
Yes.
Wow, time flies. Wow. Are you concerned? Are you looking at the world? Are you looking at society? Are you looking at and thinking, do I want to be a dad? What kind of dad am I going to be? What would you say to, newly married dad, husband that's going to be a dad? What would you say to that person, and what are you feeling yourself?
As it relates to
becoming a dad and with everything that's happening in society, are you fearful? Are you intimidated?
I to be quite honest with you, it is pretty intimidating, understanding and knowing sort of how to speak with your child, how to raise your child. It is a scary prospect. But I would also encourage you to understand that it changes with every generation. Just like my father's generation was different from his father's generation, and so on and so forth. And I think what's important here is just understanding the humanity that comes with fatherhood and with raising a child. A lot of times, if you could look at the stereotypical sort of do as I say and not as I do, that's where you started to encroach into some dangerous territory. And if we present fatherhood with humanity and with humility, and as Brother Zab was saying, growing with your child, I think that's really the important approach that you would take.
Blair, start us off on the mental health. I mean, this has been excruciating for everybody, but for young people, Zoom, computers, they don't have, social circles, they can't play, they can't get summer jobs, but I'm watching, when I ride my bike, I'm watching, kids smoking up in these parks. How have you handled the mental health side of your children? How have you navigated that?
Right. I like what Sad said there in terms of, there was two things he said. One is you got to grow up. And two, you have to engage your kids and explain why. Both my kids are, well, why? And if you can explain the rationale behind something, then it's easier to accept because they just don't want to be told what to do. In terms of growing up, in terms of, advice for new fathers is you got to grow up. You got to put away the childish things and you got to set the right example. And I think even as grown-ups, we're bombarded with so many different mediums. And for myself personally, when I put the social media away and deleted those apps from my devices and just totally cut it out, I felt better about myself. And kids that are like my kids that are Lucas is 10 and Kira is 12, they're starting to be exposed to these things, and their friends are being exposed to these things. They're just not ready for it. They're being exposed to things that their brains just aren't fully developed to process, and they're forced with making decisions what to look at, what I shouldn't look at, who I should associate with. And the way that social media is designed is it's designed to be addictive like a drug. It feeds you what you want to see, and it just constantly brings you down this one-track path to keep you engaged. So my wife and I, Tracy and I, have decided, we're going to keep them away from social media and those influences, as well as television programming, as long as we can. I guess where I'm getting at is try and keep them pure and innocent as long as they can, just to give them enough time for them to develop that maturity, okay? And they're going to make mistakes. We're always telling them, you're good people, and sometimes good people make mistakes, but you can always fall back on the Lord. So there's a plan A, be obedient, follow in the Lord's footsteps, but there's a plan B, which is when you do something wrong, run to the Lord. Right. So I think it's a lot of it is just managing time. Again, it's a bit habitual, a bit ad hoc. So healthy, practical lifestyle habits, eating right, cutting out screen time, and it's tough because with the online learning, they're on their laptops from 8 o'clock till 2, and sometimes they just keep going. Unless we come in there and we're deliberate and we say, okay, time to check it in. Let's go outside. Let's go for a walk. Let's get some exercise. You can have it for an hour after supper. Like, I mean, it's some of it's practical stuff.
So I'm hearing you say a lot of boundaries. There are boundaries,
Absolutely.
and limitations. Otherwise,
absolutely,
yeah.
and you get a lot of that. Well, why? My friends have it. My friend. Well, you're my child.
Yeah.
You know, God has entrusted you with me.
You know, I come from a generation, you didn't ask why. You just did what you were told, right? So I'm going to ask you a tough question. In the area of mental health, because you have a son and a daughter and they're different ages, do you believe when it comes to mental health, you deal with it differently with a son than with a daughter?
Absolutely.
So tell me a little bit, particularly about your daughter.
Okay, with Yerusha, I have to be very gentle. I have to hear what she says. And until I hear everything, she gets upset. You didn't hear me. Dad, I'm saying this. So I have to hear between the lines that she's saying.
So your listening skills have to be...
I have to be very competent when I'm speaking to her.
Right.
With Aizen, it's easy. Yerusha has to be explained things multiple times. Aizen I can be very harsh with. Yerusha, I will be extremely gentle. He's a boy, she's a girl. I need to handle her with love and affection.
Right.
While Aizen has a little bit more exposure because of the age as well, and of the different roles that he has had even in the church. So his exposure is different. And Yerusha's exposure is not that to that extent. She's getting there, but I have to be very explicit with her, because then she will come back and say, "Oh, Dad, but you didn't say that." "Oh, Dad, but I didn't understand that. We didn't talk about that." So I have to be very explicit with her. With Aizen, I say something, he understands between the lines, under the line, he understands what Dad said.
Right.
And if I may take another moment here, the earlier question also relates to this. If I may just say another thing here, I believe fatherhood is a generational thing. Mm-hmm. I carry a lot of my father in me. Mm-hmm. My son will carry a lot of me in him. Mm-hmm. So I think that old proverb, like father, like son, is very true. I believe, even in the Bible, God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob.
Right.
Likewise, mine. So my God was the God of my father, and he's going to be the God of my son. It is generational. If I don't learn from my previous generation,
Right.
and from my next generation, and be the father that my next generation requires, my son is not going to learn what I was carrying in terms of principle, in terms of values, in terms of what is right, what is wrong. Until I show it to them, talk to them about it, they will never learn.
Wow.
I can leave it to the society or the education system, which I don't trust,
Right.
to teach them these things. I'll give you an example. Certain things have become normal. Fathers smoking in front of their children. Everybody knows it's injurious to your life, but it has become normal. Fathers drinking in front of their children. It has become normal, right? It is not right. So how do you define right and wrong? Do you accept the wrongs in your own life and make them right for your children? I am very, let's say, cautious of what wrongs I commit, that my children don't take it to be right.
So first of all, I want to say this. I thought what you said was excellent, and I think all the politically correct minds out there, their mind just exploded because you talked about males and females being different, which they are. So thank you for that. That was like a bonus. That was on the bonus round right there. But let's talk about David. Let's pick up on this idea of values and this idea of right and wrong, because we're living in a day where even if we turn to the Bible, sometimes we can't find the chapter and the verse. Where do I find this? Especially in the whole idea of gender fluidity, etc. You show me the verse on that. You can't find it. David, you're 30 years old? How did you have to learn? Let's pick up on this. How did you have to learn what was right and wrong? And more importantly, how will you determine that, particularly when you're like, Pastor, I can't even find it in the Bible? How are you going to do that, David? How was it done for you? And then how are you going to do it? That's a tough question, I know.
That is a lot to... Okay, so I just want to paraphrase really quickly. You asked, how do I understand what is right for wrong as it relates to gender roles?
In general, even? In general, yeah.
Okay. Well, and I can't find it in the Bible?
Sometimes we can't, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I cannot remember who said it. I think it was, in terms of looking at Jesus as the archetype. He is the example that we must follow as it relates to right and wrong. And then there's also the question of morality, as the scripture says that we need to train up a child in the way that he should go so that as they get old, they will not depart from it. And the reason that is because, again, that is where we're looking at the basic installation of right and wrong. Right. The moral questions. I cannot remember which philosopher talks about the fact that if we were left to our own devices, really the question was, would we be inherently evil or inherently good? So for me, how do I teach my child? I think it starts with the adult modeling. If I am walking in an upright manner, I think that with that, and then of course divine wisdom, I should be all right. Scripture also says that if we seek first his righteousness, then everything will be added onto us. And that does include wisdom, that does include guidance, that does include whatever it is that we need. So to Brother Zab's point, do you think you carry some of your dad in you? Oh, absolutely. I am my father's child. For sure. Because you know what, Dave? Sometimes we grow up when we go, and I found this to be true as well, gentlemen. When you're growing up, you're like, well, I'm not going to be like that. I'm not going to, my dad did that, and I'm not going to be like that. And then you find out, wow, I'm my father, right? Is that? Do you have that? I'm not going to be like my dad, or do you value the things that your dad has instilled in you? Well, I mean, my dad's not a perfect man. He is still human. And so there are things in which, as a child, I recognize that I would never do. And there are things that, as a child, I said, I want to be just like dad. And funny enough, I think it's when you're fixated on a target, whether you're trying to move away from it or come close to it, the fact of the matter is you go wherever you're staring, wherever you're looking. And so even for the things in which I said, I would not. Here I am, often repeating either the same mistakes or doing the same things right. So it's sort of an interesting perspective. I think that through self-awareness and just a good general idea as to who you are as an individual, that will sort of be your marker. Blair, what is the number one, and I want to ask you that question as well, Sean. What's the number one value that you want to instill in your children, whether it was instilled in you or not? If it was instilled, great. So this whole generational wealth. But what would you say is this is the number one value I want my children to have?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it was just sort of picking up on what David said. When you've got the imprint of your father in you, and I guess it's kind of like you've got that family reputation. And I say this to my kids. It's if you were wearing a sports jersey, it's the name on your back. What does that name mean? What does that stand for? Who are you and who do you stand for? And so it's the in terms of values, it's right and wrong, turning to God. In a day and age where, there's a lot of things that we're facing where it's not in the Bible, let's go to the author and have that communion and find out, what does he say about this? God, give me some direction, give me some wisdom, give me some discernment, guide me on the right path here. This is uncharted territory for humanity right now. So it's always being mindful. This is to answer your question directly. It's being mindful of who you are, what you stand for, and the example that you're setting around other people, because you're wearing that name on your back. People are going to know you for your reputation. Sean?
Yeah, that's good. I guess for me and with Ricky going forward, it was the name. Very early in his life, like you said there, Blair, the last name, he was very fixated about this name, James. right? And
Because you have two first names.
yeah, I guess so, you know. And of course, I named him after my grandfather.
Okay.
And so there was some legacy there, and he wanted to know what this James meant. And one thing I can say of my grandfather and my father, one value that I made sure, and I didn't drum it into him, was integrity. Because that's what the name really stood for. You know, my grandfather was a hardworking man. You know, he wasn't a perfect man by any sense of the means. But one thing, you know, everybody in the community spoke of about, you know, Richard James was as a man of integrity. And the same with my dad. You know, my dad is still, you know, a very respected man in our community. And everybody will say of Guy James, he's a man of integrity. And so I wanted to make sure that, you know, Ricky had that. And him going away from home so young, I mean, he left home at 15 traveling around with baseball and stuff.
Wow.
One thing I wanted to make sure that was no compromises was the integrity that he had as a young man with his name, because, you know, maybe he made it to the majors. And let's face it, we see it all the time with celebrities. What you did in your youth comes up,
right?
And then all of a sudden your name is stained because of a stupid thing that you did. So I always maintained with him, I said, listen, wherever you go, whatever you do, whatever you put your hand to, remember you doing it, one, for God.
Right.
And number two, remember the integrity that you carry within you so that you don't stain your name. So for me, it was integrity. From day one, it was integrity.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm going to ask you for a one-word answer. In this question, you're not going to explain it. You're going to give me one-word answer. When you look at Father God, right, one-word answer, what is the value, what is the characteristic that you see in Father God that stands out to you? One-word answer, no explanation, then we're going to shift. David, one-word answer.
Let's go first.
Yeah.
Okay.
And there's no pass here. You don't get the pass. One-word answer.
Just.
Is that deal?
Trust God.
Trust.
Humility.
Humility.
Grace.
Grace. Awesome. Okay, so guys, I want to talk about influences. I want to talk about the entertainment industry. We live in a very, you know, Kardashian world, okay? How do we as believers, how do we navigate that world and our world? And you know, I'm a preacher, you know, so I have a preacher's kid. I have two children. One is married, but you know, my daughter still lives, you know, in the house, but she's in her 20s, and so you know, obviously it's a little bit different. But how do you navigate? Zabi, I'll start with you. How do you navigate, you know, what they watch, what they listen to, what is influencing them? So I'm talking whether it's sports, whether it's fashion, and not become, you know, legalistic. How do we navigate that so that they don't literally just turn us off and we don't send them, you know, running the other way? Where is that? And I don't like the word balance, but where's that wisdom?
Well, I would say this generation, our next generation, is very smart. They are fast learners. They learn technology and social media so fast that you are just comprehending the name of it and they already know the whole thing. Until recently, I was not on Instagram. I told my daughter, I was looking at her phone and I went through her friends and everything, and
I
I
like
said,
that. You're going through a
and
phone.
yeah, I did.
Write that down, parents.
And I said, you know what? The day I decide to do this, start this, I will become an expert on this.
On Instagram.
And I did. 3 days. I spent good time learning and understanding what is this doing to my children.
Wow.
And how are my children using it? So I had to step in, again, upgrade myself, educate myself,
right,
and be able to talk about it. Because until I'm able to talk about a certain thing, somebody else has taken that position and they are teaching my children. So I had to step in there, learn it, and to be able to talk about it.
And obviously see the content.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So Yerusha has cut off live times on the use of the phone, the social media and whatnot, and she knows she cannot delete anything. Mom and dad will check anytime we want to.
Ooh, I like it.
And Aizen goes through that too.
I like it.
And it is, I tell them, it's not that I don't trust you. It is, I don't trust the world we live in.
Good.
So I don't know what the world is exposing you to.
Right.
And my job is to filter that.
Right.
I want to trust you. Don't break my trust.
Excellent.
I would love you and trust you all my life as long as I live, but don't break my trust. If you do the darndest of, the baddest of the things, come and tell me. Because I cannot defend you, protect you, provide you guidance or counsel if you hide things from me.
Excellent.
You need to be able to come and talk to me about everything. And not that you will not make mistakes. I've made mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes.
Sure.
So you have to be real too, right? Sometimes the kids do a lot of things where they don't realize it to be, and it goes back to that same question, right and wrong. They don't understand it. Everybody else is doing it, so might as well be me too. I was 13 years old when I asked my dad this question: how do I know what is right and what is wrong? Something which is right for you may be wrong for me, and what is wrong for me could be right for you. So how do I decide this? I'm 13 years old, for heaven's sake. Don't expect me to think like an adult, right?
Right.
So my dad gave me a very simple answer, and he was a very renowned preacher back home, a godly man. He gave his life to Jesus when he was 17. He gave me a very simple answer. And we sometimes as fathers fail to do that. We give such intelligent answers to our kids that they get more confused. They just don't comprehend what we were saying. My father said to me, anything that you do for the good will always be right, even if it turns out to be wrong later on.
It's good.
So, that was a foundational thing for me.
It's good.
Do good.
It's good.
It will always be right, even because your intent needs to be good.
Excellent.
And God looks at your intention.
Excellent. Blair, you got some preteens. Tell me
Yeah.
about influences.
Yeah, you know what? I hardly have anything to add after what Sab just said there. That was gospel right there. That was good stuff. To expand on it a little bit, I think you kind of have to ask yourself, like, who do you want raising your kids? Do you want it to be you, which honestly you have a God-given responsibility to do? I think it would be a sin for you not to take on that responsibility and raise your children right. Or do you want TV, Hollywood, movies, social media, magazines, and your friend and your children's peers, raising and influencing them? And like Sab said, like you have to be at this age, because I can see it coming. I can see it already. Their peers they're on TikTok and Instagram and Twitch and all these things that it's penetrating their eye gates and ear gates, and we got to know what's there. We got to jump in and say, hey, be that filter. What's right, what's wrong, and help them understand. You know what? This is real life. What's going on here is real life. What you're seeing on the device is make-believe, because that you're just seeing the best of people, or you're just seeing what people want you to see. You're not seeing the real them. So put that aside and spend time with real people. Get to know real people. That's how you're going to develop your intuition and develop your sense of right and wrong, and allow your spirit to guide you.
I like that. And many times, gentlemen, I've also said to my daughters at different times, the world you live in is not the real world, because, they experience protection, they experience the blessing of God. They think everybody lives like this. And they would say to me, what do you mean? Everybody doesn't live like this? And it's like, no. And then you have to look at the maturity of the child. I've got a 23-year-old that lives at home, and, I don't think I'm telling tales out of school, but she likes that program Friends. Well, I think Friends is just, I don't know. I have just no time or place for it. But depending on the maturity of children, it's not just a matter anymore of just saying you can't do that, because they're going to go find a way.
Yes.
And so you might as well understand what they're watching, understand what's influencing them, and then have discussions with perspective of what are they portraying.
Exactly.
Right? Sean, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I like what you said there, Pastor. Is like, they'll go find a way. and if we could just segue into the area of substance abuse and stuff as well, right? So, my dad and my uncles were wise people, but foolish people. And I say that because alcohol is something that, in our community was, and of course, Ricky being part Latino as well. So, alcoholism is a problem.
Staple, right?
It's a problem.
Staple.
Yeah. And so, when I was younger, my dad made sure I understood what alcohol can do to you, the effects of, and why you shouldn't. So when I was 12 years old, it was one Christmas, I was 12, him and my uncle got my cousin and I completely drunk. Absolutely stoned. Gave us every alcohol we wanted. Because as a kid, you see your parents, you're at a party, you go take a sip here and there. So they said, we're going to fix you. We're going to show you what alcohol does.
Right.
So they got us stoned, I mean bad. But it taught me a lesson.
Right.
It taught me if I touch this stuff, this is the consequence.
Bad thing's going to happen.
I didn't do that to Ricky.
Okay.
Just want to clarify. But, in saying that, we weren't sheltering him either. We said to him, look, here's the right and wrong. And you go to the biblical passages and you speak to that. And the whole thing is with social media and the things that are portrayed, because we know marijuana is legal now and all that kind of stuff. Does that make it right? Well, no. The Bible says not to defile your body. So, and I know the people out there are going to probably go crazy, defile your body, marijuana is good for you. No, it's not. Let's just call it what it is.
That's right.
And social media is and unfortunately enough, I really didn't have to deal with it in his teen years per se, because, he came up, Facebook was around, but it wasn't as poisonous as it is today, as you have it as well. The worst I had to face was Caillou and all that kind of nonsense, you know what I mean? But it's tough. But even in his adult years, looking at social media, how does it affect their decision making on spending? What do they go purchase? What ads are being I'm in the business of ad remarketing. Wow. So I know what you're looking at your device, and we're going to push it to your device. So what are you looking at? How is that going to influence your purchasing, your decision making skills? When he got his own job and started working for himself, he wanted a nice car, you want to do this. Of course, you go on Auto Trader and you start looking at stuff. He ended up buying a very expensive car, and I know his mother wasn't happy about it. I particularly wasn't, but he had to learn that poor decisions are going to have consequences, right? So it's not like he couldn't afford it, but he saw quickly that I'm spending X amount of dollars a month on that thing over there, and I can't do this. Does it make sense?
Right.
So consequence came with that. And it's through social media, because why? Everybody, your buddies are driving this, people are seeing this, so you want to go and... Now he's quite content driving a Corolla. Right. Why? Because he got smart, and subsequently doesn't spend money on stupid things, purchased a home, all the rest of it. So social media does have an influence, not just in behavior, but I think even, what they do with what they finances, how they think, and consequently how they end up. Yeah. So to Zab's thing, you got to guard it, but I think you also need to let them fall and bruise their knees sometimes.
Yeah. As long as they don't fall off a cliff,
Well, even if they fall off a cliff. There's ropes, but you know what I mean.
So you know what, gentlemen? It's almost like we need a part two, to be honest. We could talk about racism, sexuality, finances. I think we need a part two, but here's the way I want to end the program. I want to go around the horn, if you will, and I want you to give, the crowd that is watching, those that are watching this live, those on demand, give us the number one thing. The number one thing, David, from your perspective, obviously, dads to be, give us the number one thing that you would want the dads of today to know. You're coming from different backgrounds and generations, but honestly, I thought your answers have been practical, solid, biblical. What would be the number one thing you would say, David, to dads to be? You're 30 years with your dad. I know you have an excellent relationship with your dad. What's the number one thing you would say?
Number one thing I would say is just be ready to spend time. Be ready to spend time with your kids. I really think that relationship is important. Building relational capital with your child is important, because if you invest in your child in terms of the time that you put in them or with them, especially as a young child, you will reap and you will benefit from what you've sown. And I say that even with like in relation to my father and any real relationship, my brother, the kids at my church as a youth leader. If you spend time and if you build relational capital with these younger individuals, they'll come back to you, and it will come back to you in a positive way.
Trust God. Yeah, definitely trust God. I find since I've become a father, I've really learned, how much my father loves me and how patient he is with me and how much grace he has for me and how much he wants to spend time with me. So, and a lot of times when I'm disciplining my children, I feel like, God, are you talking to me? So it's, for new fathers or fathers that might be struggling, it's don't despair. Trust the Lord because he does have a purpose for you as a father.
And for your children.
And for your children. So as you are fathering, as you're being a father, love your children. Father in love and emulate, show them that God loves them through how you behave and how you act and treat them.
Wow. Sean.
I would say for fathers to just be authentic. Don't try and be something you're not. Kids they can see through the smoke. Just be authentic. Just know who you are. Be real. Just be real. And be involved with your children. Ask them, what can I do to be a better father? Because they'll tell you, and be prepared for the answer you don't want to hear. Because sometimes kids they'll tell you what you want to, but just be authentic. Just be you. Be real. Just be who you are, and let your child develop a relationship with that authenticity from you, and go with it. Yeah.
Wow. You get the last word.
Okay, thank you, Pastor. My answer is a little. It's going to take I think a minute or so. To me, there's no one thing. And I like to quote an example from the Bible. So God promised Abraham that your children will be, your descendants will be like the grains of the sand and the stars in the sky and everything, right? But yet Isaac's wife, his own son's wife, was barren. And it says there, and Isaac went unto the Lord and pleaded for his wife, and she became pregnant, and then she bore a son. So the children started coming. So that is the general side of it. But what did I learn? I learned that just like every generation has a blessing, there are blessings that your forefathers had. And we don't ask for them, and we don't receive them, and we don't transfer them in our next generations. So I learned, and I started praying, Father, I don't know, I was not present there. You were. You don't forget the promises and the blessings that you gave to my forefathers. I want all of them in my generation, and I want those to be transferred to my next generation. And that gave me trust in him, because I cannot comprehend all the complexities of modern day living. I cannot have the absolute wisdom, but he does. Amen. So he knows the past, the present, and the future. So if I trust him for the future of my children, and he's already seen their life and he's seen their destiny, he has given me this time, this moment to be in their life to do what he intends me to do. So if I learn that, and if I fulfill that purpose, I have been a good father.
Excellent. Gentlemen, I want to thank you for joining us today. This has been great. I've enjoyed it. My friends, I trust that you've enjoyed it. I trust that you've been blessed. I mean, there is some incredible wisdom, experience. We're not just blowing smoke here. This is reality. This is life. Being a father is incredibly important. You have an opportunity to make a tremendous impact, as we've just heard, on generations to come. Are you just not so joyful that we have a heavenly Father, and he has given us an assignment to be good earthly fathers? Again, I want to thank you for joining us, and God bless you richly.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Thank you.